Welcome back to Clean Titans. Today, we have a truly remarkable guest joining us from Shanghai, a city at the heart of the world's most dynamic clean energy transformations. We're thrilled to be speaking with Jie Xiao, General Manager of China at the New Energy Nexus. Jie, thank you so much for making the time to be with us.
You're welcome. Hello, everyone.
Jie, your background is incredibly impressive. Over a decade of leadership experience specializing in business development, strategic implementations, and maximizing social impact, particularly within the climate space. As the general manager of China's New Energy Nexus, you're at the forefront of fostering clean energy innovations and entrepreneurship. For our audience, could you briefly introduce yourself and the New Energy Nexus and its mission, especially its role in China?
Sure, I would prefer to start with New Energy Nexus. New Energy Nexus is the world's leading clean energy ecosystem builder. Originally founded in 2004 in California, the previous name was California Clean Energy Fund or CalCIF, where we have invested over 30 million USD in 150 early stage startups, including Tesla. And from 2016, we started the global expansion. Actually, was the first global office or overseas office. And today, Energy Nexus operates in 13 countries and regions, offering financial support, business opportunities, and on top of that, a thriving ecosystem for clean tech pioneers worldwide with a global sales focus. China office, we aligned with the global vision, which is 100% of the clean energy for 100% of the population. And personally, I really like it. Also hold the same mission, support diverse entrepreneurs to drive innovation and build equity. Meanwhile, China has a unique market. So with that, we have developed a very targeted strategy to address local dynamics and harness China's unique advancement in clean energy. So team position ourselves as a vital bridge, hope to connect China with the world to amplify the global South voices. And we like the bottom-up approach, scouting innovative solutions, tech and culture exchange, delegations, also run accelerator programs, but always in context to advance the global clean tech transitions. Myself, actually, I'm a newbie in field. I only joined New Energy Nexus last year. I was truly attracted by the vision and unique approach to stand by the side of SMEs and the startups. Value startups as the unsung heroes. We think they are the solution provider. They are the one who create jobs and generates GDP instead of like them as the evil party who generates environmental problems as some traditional NGOs ideology. And so that was one of my previous backgrounds. I started my career in Europe after graduating from a top business school in Europe. And I was working for investment banking, for commodity trading 2012. Consider that I want to pursue for more meaningful life. And that's how I had a dramatic shift from finance to social impacts, especially working for Chinese philanthropy foundations. So that part of the journey was lasted for around 10 years. Up to date, I'm still a board member for quite a few civil society organizations and also development. I also see as a, let's say, NGO veteran, I see some limitations. So New Energy Nexus for me is absolutely new journey, how to combine same sort of civil society sector collaboration and work with a lot of groups with innovation, global context.
Yeah, it's clear New Energy Nexus plays a pivotal role. Today, we're diving into a topic that's front and center for everyone tracking
Mm.
global climate action. China's clean energy transition. Recent news and analysis suggests that China's emissions may have peaked, would be a monumental milestone. This is a topic of immense interest and debate. And who better to shed light on it than you with your on the ground experience and deep expertise?
To your points, and indeed, like China still stands as the largest greenhouse gas emitter. It's also become the greatest clean energy solution provider. So there are quite a few saying that like has already the carbon peak 5 years in advance, but we will see how the summer goes. Normally, weather plays a huge role, and here, since the hydropower is the second largest electricity question on like and why China becomes the leader in clean energy. I think for me at least it's a blend of quite a few. It started with like the environmental commitments. I remember like it was like very highly air polluted. It's difficult to get out and especially during the winter without the mask. Or sometimes the eyes can even not open in the north of China. And then lots of domestic economic opportunities in the last few years probably know that. And so one of the pillar of the Chinese economy was real estate. Real estate's decline since 2020. So energy, the two top driver of China's economic growth. So you see there's a lot of incentive here. And then on the other hand, China still holds the leadership in global trading. It has a lot of capacity in the supply chain and productions. Wings the top clean energy and like holds around like 60 to 80% of the global production and also capacity on the whole value chain. And finally, also talk a lot of energy security and under the current geopolitics. So that clean energy is also a very good to balance. Yeah.
If summer is too hot, you think that 1.6% reduction in emissions might not hold true?
Talked to quite a few experts in the field. Already see that in 2022 and 2023 of the droughts. So there are not enough hydropower, and then on that case, coal and fuel have to,
Kick in. Right.
yeah.
Right.
I think we will see because of the energy cycle is not enough. Probably
Right.
they will still be in the
Right.
coming
Right.
years.
Absolutely. 1.6% reduction in emissions is quite small, but it's a significant milestone to
Yeah.
achieve. Has been rapidly deploying renewable energy at an unprecedented scale,
Mm.
from solar to wind to EVs. The numbers are staggering. What are the key drivers behind this incredible pace of clean energy adoption and manufacturing leadership in China? Is it primarily economic opportunity, energy security, environmental concerns, or a combination?
Just like I mentioned that for me, I think it's a blend of few factors, including commitments, economic opportunities, and also decisions from Beijing. Like one thing I want to highlight is current leadership do have ambitious pollution control targets, started from the binding carbon peak and the neutrality pledge, and then followed by working guidance, the action plans. And so all this has created a stable and long-term markets for renewables. Also, like we read the news, talk a lot about civilizations, which green is gold, and man and nature coexist harmoniously. Like small is like so 10 years ago, the Chinese government officials performance ranking, which is a key figure for their promotions, have already include the implementation of our climate goals. And then as you will see that different cities and the subnationals, they're gonna compete each other for achievement of a climate goals.
Are there specific provincial policies or regional initiatives that are particularly effective and perhaps less known internationally that are contributing significantly to this overall national push?
Mm. Can share examples from Shanghai, but I want to highlight the province nearby is a coastal province called Jiangsu. So we all know urban trade war, but still Jiangsu double down its export-oriented economy. And it's leveraged both flagship projects and the robust policy benefits to attract the foreign headquarters and investment to the province. Year enacted a series of regulations, including promote and protecting foreign investment and guarantee national treatment plus approvals, and very explicit for regional and functional headquarters from overseas. the chance to attend one of the very large level matchmaking conference. One had over 300 companies to visit, zero carbon parks, the free trade zones, and their innovation clusters, and then followed by business matchmaking and OU signing. Small city in Jiangsu, take a small example called Yancheng. Yancheng has the carbon and smart energy innovation park. That's part of the industrial park. In China, many of the industry is clustered in parks, and it's a very successful public collaborations because this one was built by the state grid Jiangsu and with the solution from Huawei, and it served a demo for multi-energy integrations, carbon management, and on-site renewables. With that, Jiangsu also allocates billions of grants for energy use audit and the green infrastructure and ISO compliant carbon accounting. The free trade zones and the innovation clusters, they provide free and tax breaks. I think all this was to give confidence Chinese companies, but also foreign investments who are oriented, give them some backups, because we do know that, for example, in Europe, there are CBAN, and in the US, there's different regulations to made in China products. But do see that level officers is like actively and even proactively thinking of solutions. And that's very impressive for me.
Beyond sheer scale, what are some of the most exciting clean energy innovations emerging from China right now that you believe have the potential for global impact? Are there particular sectors or technologies such as long duration storage, advanced nuclear, smart grids, where China is truly leading the way?
Mm. Credit is still given to the massive deployment of solar and wind. Next week, they will have the like a solar snack. We will see the latest. For solar, we do know that's 80% of the global module capacities. And for wind turbines, is of the new installations here. It's also worthy to highlight the breakthroughs in energy storage, as you mentioned. Big companies like CATL, BYD, world leading, and on long duration storage. So it could deliver 8 to 12-hour capacity at below average global cost. And that's the most maybe EVs. So 80%, 60% global production is from China for now, and green hydrogen. So green hydrogen enjoys market policies and very clear scale-up targets, but like it's still less efficient in conversion, and it has a higher lifetime cost compared to even more advanced markets in US. On the grid side, also example probably of the or ultra voltage transmission networks, because lots of renewables are produced in the west of China, but the consumption happens on the east. So China has 40 lines of UHV lines with less than 50% of the loss rate. Yeah, that's one very like.
Do you know what is the capacity of those ultra high voltage lines?
I know how long it is. Nowadays, it's over 30,000 kilometers of the transmission lines.
Great. So it's bringing all that power from north and
Yeah, north,
west.
east, south. Yeah.
Great. Does New Energy Nexus identify and nurture these cutting edge startups and technologies within China's unique entrepreneurial ecosystem?
Mm. So we ourselves as a market enabler, that means we always like staying close, connected startups and connect them to the very fast moving innovation ecosystem. We run a tech-driven platform like accelerator programs to support entrepreneurs locally and help them to solve real market challenges, especially around industrial decarbonizations. So with that, we work closely with big corporates to match them with startups and offering solutions in areas such as advanced batteries you mentioned, hydrogen, CCUS. A lot of companies are interested in these technologies, green fuels, and software. AI-powered climate tools is also a very hot topic here. So this is not only accelerate innovation here in China. We think a lot of deployment and implementations, especially to help scale impact across supply chains. And one other, I would say, advantage for us as an international network, global network, is we do bridge local innovations with global network. We offer market insight and research, and we a lot of overseas companies for opportunities and for collaboration opportunities. Yeah.
For looking into the clean energy space, China presents both immense opportunity and unique complexities. What is the current investment landscape like for clean energy startups and projects in China? Are domestic or international investors more dominant? And what kind of financing mechanisms are providing the most usefulness?
Currently, the players, especially local government and industrial funds, are dominant. International facing much higher barriers compared to, let's say, 10 years ago. There are a few reasons. So there are geopolitical options, the China decoupling. So US fund is less attractive, and also state-led and industry priorities, kind of like foreign capitals, but also private funds. And there's like higher regulation compared to before, which is good. So tweak the data rules. Or downsides, it's more difficult to go IP for companies. And economic speaking, so compared to 10, 15 years ago, the GDP growth like currently is 4 to 5%. And it's also less attractive for VCs because they bear very high risk. So they are expecting with home observations, there are many VCs that have shifted to more emerging markets like Southeast Asia, because China has become a maturing market, especially for clean energy. Yeah, I see some it's those very high tech sectors like generated. I mean, still have interest for investors.
Well, at 20 billion, China can't keep growing at 10%, right? I
Mhm.
mean, 20 trillion, you could growing at 10%. It has to slow down at that higher
At some
level,
point, yeah,
right? You keep when you're that big.
no.
What are the biggest challenges or risks for foreign entities looking to invest in or collaborate with clean energy companies in China?
Mm, I won't call it challenge. I think it's all risks. I think it's more barriers. I think for because we are working a lot in these cross-border collaborations. We see China, including Japan, South Korea, is high context countries. So it's not easy for people to understand the culture, the language. It's not easy for readings if you're not from here. And I see a lot of foreign entities that come to China with a joint venture. I think that makes big sense, especially for newcomers. You definitely need people in the ground. I think that's first thing, like a jumping on my mind, the culture and the language barrier. One other thing I compare to, because I also talk to a lot of international company who has living in China for more than a decade or even 2 decades. When I talk to them, they do think like that the China it started to make its own agenda. So that's also a new phenomenon. That means maybe 20, 30 years ago when the foreign company in China, the Chinese government was fully welcoming and they are making like every approach for it. But now the regulation, the barrier is higher. And then I think it also requires, let's say, the understanding and adoption each other. Before it's more China adopts foreign investment, but now I think foreign investment also entities kind of like a need to the Chinese agenda.
So the red carpet has a few speed bumps on it now. Let's get to the core of the recent headlines. Reports suggesting that China's emissions might have peaked or
Mm,
started to go down a bit. From your perspective, what metrics are most crucial in determining if and when China's emissions have truly peaked? And what do these recent reports signify?
Firstly, I see in the Chinese media, this is not large scale to report on this. And that reflects the Chinese authorities. Normally, they are very cautious, except it's 100% sure that they will not announce it. So most of the analysis from, like for example, I read the own article about, and so that's one thing. I think that's implies there will still fluctuations. In terms of ask, I think normally we look at the total CO2 emissions. We look at use. There's a lot of conflicts on the coast, and also us. We look at how clean energy is growing, because there's change. It's not a short-term slowdown. So I think it's like we still have to mention previously. I think we still have to debate after the summer finish to see if the electricity more coal and gas to make up. So I think they. And then also, as I said, 1 or 1.6, it's CS. So the economic fluctuations maybe will increase, reverse the current downward trend. For example, if the economy is going very well, maybe the heavy industry too, like we will see, and the industry activities will keep the pace.
There was a massive deployment of solar and clean energy because of rate change later
Mm,
this year in China, right? So
mm.
there was an enormous amount of deployment so far this year. So
Um,
hopefully that might have some positive effect.
Honest, like structure-wise, green energy deployment already outpace of the electricity demand. We still have a challenge of the consumption, the integration of clean energy to the grid. That requires even longer infrastructure development.
So do you think this is a sustainable peak, or are there underlying factors that could see emissions rebound in the near future, perhaps related to economic growth priorities?
Yeah, I do know that economic growth slows or facing pressure. Beijing will have to double down on heavy industry and infrastructure investment, and both of them are carbon-intensive sectors. And the coal plays biggest role to ensuring energy securities. So normally you see in the winter that the coal consumption is like skyrocketing, because that's the season that's like the renewables are not forming the and meanwhile the whole north of China needs heat.
What is the state of heat pump adoption in China?
Sorry.
Heat pump adoption in China, what is the state of that for heating in the north? It's like a AC but running backwards, the heat pump?
Ah, right. No, I don't have the figure,
Okay,
unfortunately.
no worries. If a peak has indeed happened, what specific government policies, industrial shifts, or societal changes do you credit most for the achievement? Is it the ambitious renewable targets, the crackdown on coal energy efficiency mandates, or something else entirely?
I think for many experts, the emission peak is still due to the rapid growth of renewables. That's wind, solar, nuclear. So these are our electricity demand already. And so it's also gradually reducing the on the other hand, energy efficiency mandates and the industry upgrades, like the industry electrifications, also played key roles. And another factor is the slowdown in construction and real estate, which used to be the key pillar of economic growth and GDP growth. And because of the state decline, that naturally reduced the demand for Asian products such as cement and steel. I think all this.
It's the dual carbon goal, carbon peaking by 2030, carbon neutrality by 2060, influencing these on the ground changes and driving action from different sectors.
Mm. It's a very ledge. People from the students and people know about 3060. So 2030 carbon peak and 2060 and carbon neutrality. We call that like a 3060. It's definitely like a driving sector-wide changes, investment in clean energy skyrocketing. There are more and more strict emission regulations, and we see the booming in innovation of clean techs and the very large-scale implementations. We also see that of the mindset, and actually it becomes a powerful signature across China. It's not a top slogan anymore. It's started to drive real change on the ground of people's mindset, especially younger generations. I think all these are very positive. And then the ordinary citizen fee is from the government perspective. As I mentioned, the government officers, their performance is now partly measured by green metrics, not just GDP. So we see many provinces shift investment into renewables, like EVs and the infrastructure. It provides a lot of new policies that support this direction. And wise, it's still a bit challenging in the industry, to be honest, because they are also struggling to survive. But all the leading companies, I think they are trying very hard to set up pilots of the low carbon technologies and electrifying the process and stay competitive. Every big companies, Chinese Wali, Tencent, or foreign companies, like yesterday I was talking to Saint-Gobain, it's a French, or their innovation team or IMD, the core is for, and I think that's also very, very, yeah. One last point is the private sector and startups. I see they are too. So you see a startups BP before the mostly writes their products, their services, top one of the niche market, etc. But now they always like highlighting the 3060 policies, how their product or service like align with the pledge. I think that's also great, especially in our sector.
Excellent. Which sector are contributing most significantly to this emissions reduction trend?
Mm.
For example, is it the power generation industry, transportation, or buildings? And where do the biggest challenges still lie in decarbonization?
I would say the power sector. The power sector leads the emission reductions, and of course, thanks to renewables. That's also where we see the quickest growth in solar, wind, hydro, nuclear, all this. And I also see, especially backed by EV and also hydrogen. So I think these two sectors that have credit. Other ask me about the challenge. I would say number one, the industrial sector, such as steel, cement, chemicals, they are still the largest emitter overall. And like technically, there's lots of technological barriers to for those sectors to adopt the old tax. Currently, the cost is still very high. So, and also buildings, green with better energy efficiency, electrifications. But in China, many old buildings. So new building is a bit better to adopt the new regulations and etc. But big cities, for example, Shanghai, there's so many old buildings still consuming enormously and very challenging to some. I think most of progress is in power and transport, but industry is still toughest.
Are there any hard to abate sectors in China where you see promising pathways or innovations emerging,
Mm,
like green cement or steel?
So in chemicals industries, I see there's a push for electrifying process, and because currently the green electricity is getting cheaper and cheaper, so I see the incentive is also cost efficiency perspective. And another thing is AI. So like many companies, the smart factory upgrades using AI like BIMs to optimize. I think that's also very interesting to see.
In California, there a massive plant uh, incorporated with micro steel. So
Mm,
they'll be making steel using solar electricity.
that's wonderful to hear.
A Chinese peak would have profound global implications. What message does this send to the international community regarding climate action? How might it influence other developing nations' approach to their own energy transition?
Mm. I think me as a Chinese person is very glad to see that this is not only a commitment, but also like very stable climate actions followed by from top up alignments. I think this maybe could encourage developing nations and the global south to pursue sustainable transitions, to encourage them to set like a climate actions controversial to economic growth. It could be the economic driver for the growth, etc. Last week, I had a panel discussion leading Chinese business school called SIPS. They had a very big African delegation coming from different countries, Kenya, etc., to China. It was like a 1 week round trip. We a lot, And I think I see most of these dedicators, I mean, they're mostly from they're entrepreneurs. They're very interested to see how those specific technologies could be adopted in Africa. So for me, I see a lot of potential for cross-border collaborations and sharing, experience sharings.
From a global collaboration standpoint, how can the international clean energy community best support or learn from China's journey rather than just observing it?
Mm, I would say it started from probably the Chinese government and Chinese people probably are not best storyteller. So I'm sharing its starting points, what best practices around the great flexibilities, the success in solars, in battery, in energy storage. I think that's to start with, and we could start with. And secondly, I think there's a lot of potential for joint innovations. Of course, it's also depending on where you talk about global or international, if it's global north. Myself, I see a lot of potential for Chinese researchers and to learn generation technologies like hydrogen, CCUS, green manufacturing, carbon markets. Like meanwhile, countries, I think many of them are interested in how this like energy efficiency storage operates. And there's a lot of like a joint innovation mechanisms we could build. And if you talk about global south, I think of large scale deployment. If China has its capacity, like very cost effective solutions, I think global south could definitely use and learn and then produce like locally. Yeah. So I think of like the two-way learning, like countries learn from each other and exchange instead of like silos, reflecting the current decoupling and like the internationalisms like we have already achieved. I think that's not a good way for issues.
Despite the rapid progress, what are the primary challenges or headwinds China still faces in its path to achieving its long term climate goals and full decarbonization? Are there infrastructure bottlenecks, grid stability issues, economic pressures, or social considerations?
Mm. It's still a few challenges, like started with like key solutions for heavy industry for CUS, long duration storage. It's still costly. It's still around 40, more cost than, and then on the other hand, we started to build the carbon markets. It's still maturing. So the price is around 60 yuan per ton. That's significantly lower than what's the EU rates. I think it's still a long way to go for the carbon markets. And also, we know that the resource are abundant in the west, the north of China. The demand is in the east, south, and that needs an extensive UHV, high voltage lines. So I think that's domestic speaking. Internationally, and with the trade barriers on the clean tech, like the solar panels and the EV, it poses risks for green trade tensions. And so I think all then it could lead to a structural imbalance.
How is China addressing issues like grid integration of massive renewable capacity? And what lessons can other countries draw from their experience? You already
I don't
mentioned
have to go on this. I think actually one of the big challenge, the grid integrations, because don't have a lot of DRE or distributed and energy, mostly as they are concentrated like big solar farms, etc. So actually the grid integration is a big challenge, bottleneck. But as I mentioned, the V is one of the solutions. It's enabled efficient long duration power transfer. Yeah, but still other things like we should explore the electricity mechanisms. I think there's things to do. How our grid could be more modernized.
right, smart grid. So
Yeah,
it's more like the electricity works more like the internet rather than the
yeah,
old grid.
exactly. Yeah,
That's
because
what
I
we
mean,
need to
like
get
a country, the grid is national owned. So to be honest, the evolution is slower on private sector.
exactly.
Mm,
Yeah, we all need to get that smart grid, like an internet type grid future.
yeah.
You have a passion for cross sector partnerships and
Mm,
maximizing social impact. How
mm.
crucial are these elements to China's clean energy transition? Are we seeing a growing focus on the social equity aspects of this transition, such as green jobs, community engagement, or addressing environmental justice concerns?
Actually, all of that are happening in China in a very different context. So it's sometimes difficult mapping the Western ways of like a community engagement or community works to the China to the I would say that I think the STIA started by the high level strategy. This is like a top down. Little by little, I think it's covered more for social equity, for along with other policies, Chinese policies for the rural area visualizations. And now we trying to build a lot of like villages and then lots of like in the schools as well. So I think all of this are existed here. But priority wise, still economic development is still the driver. Then other things follows.
You recently mentioned futurology frameworks on how we should live today at the Shanghai Climate Week.
Mm.
Could you elaborate on this concept and its relevance to the clean energy movement?
Sure. I actually invite some friends and who are futurologists, but also with a very strong experiences in climate, host these events. Futurology is a new framework for me as well. The concept emphasizes very proactive planning and very long-term planning because many problem happens because very short view. We only think of today, next year. But futurology frameworks asking you to think about 100 years later, like three generations afterwards. It encourages you to jump out of the box. And then we look more about not only today, but a longer period of lots of they're important. Take the time frames. Like we talked a lot about educating next generation as well to align the current action with the low carbon future.
Your past with Shanghai United Foundation and E-Youth Center
Mm,
suggests a strong commitment to youth and social initiatives. How
mm,
important is it to engage the next generation of entrepreneurs and innovators in China in this clean energy transformation? What advice would you give to young people looking to make an impact in this field?
mm. I do see people in this. The clean energy film very creative, innovative, and future thinking. Some people become more and more mission driven, and they don't want only for money. They want to work for some objective bigger than, and they can bring fresh ideas. They are more digital, and also I think in speaking they have a better sense of urgency in this like transformation. Like it was the founder, he launched the company when he was 30, and most of his team member are under 35, and that's really examples. And also on the other hand, for me, I think climate topics is not only technical. It's a space for designers, for communicators, for finance people, for engineers, for everybody come together. And I think young people in general, they are cross sectors for them to build up new platforms and find new solutions. So I think that's all the good sides. In terms of advice, I would say like anyone who are early 20s, like I suggest like where they are. If they have a group or they think of like a start to build a startup or a local community, I think start with small projects that can grow like something powerful. And then there are so many like ways to help AI and there are so many platforms. Young people just need to be curious and explore. The sector seems very high bar in terms of technology, but many things you can. Myself, I'm also learning every day and fascinated by the development, the speed, and the dynamics in the field. And finally, so Chinese, many people, their education and growth, people are waiting for missions. But I think in any innovative sectors, you shouldn't like wait for anyone to very straightforward guidance. You should try yourself. So don't wait for permissions. Many solutions are not just for expert and officers. I think like young people have, and one of them is like they are very or brave that can push the solution to the next levels.
Are there specific programs or initiatives New Energy Nexus runs to cultivate this talent and drive innovation from the ground up?
We do, yeah. And so we do have multiple to support young, including startup trainings, technical incubations, and also provide funding support. For example, we with universities help students to turn climate innovations ideas for into real world solutions. We facilitate the dialogues between students and the government leaders. And in China, last year, we hosted job fairs in the west of China for university students, for them to gain insight from the clean tech veterans and helping them to map their career path. And we also actively recruit interns to give them, a real job. And sometimes it's really surprisingly good.
Where do you see the biggest opportunities for China to collaborate with other nations, particularly in the clean energy space,
Mm,
beyond just trade? Are there
mm,
specific areas like R&D, policy sharing, or carbon markets where partnerships could be strengthened?
mm. I think an ideal word, R&D collaboration is a huge one because like different geography areas, different continents have unique like strengths. And for example, to make big advancement in batteries, EVs, hydrogens, smart grid, and like niche techs, and then team up with other countries, co-funded research or pilot projects, and then we can learn from other countries as well. But I know that currently collaborations, especially on the university level, is super challenging. China, US, or even China, Europe. So I think that's more idea. But secondly, I would say policy sharing. So I think China gained a lot of experiences scaling clean tech very fast, cost effective, large. I think like as clustering parks, local incentives, how Lemon compete with each other and learn from each other. I think that's something we can share to the rest of the world. And then we can learn grid flexibilities. That's not something we're good at. The carbon pricing, carbon markets, and just the transition we just started. So just the transition planning, I think we also can learn from Europe, for example. There's a rule for multi-learning here. I see for corporations in emerging markets more and more. I see China has a strong initiative, especially with the initiative of abandoned roads through the multi platforms and private partnerships to help build clean energy in Belt and Road countries like Africa, Southeast Asia, ASEAN, Latin America. And China can definitely act only as a supplier, but also co-investors, technology partners, and ecosystem. I think the opportunity should move from everything in China to collaborated with China in clean tech, with ideas, innovations can be shared, not only in products.
Excellent. What's one key misconception the international community might have about China's approach to clean energy that you'd like to clarify?
At least through the English writing media I read, or I think one common misconception is like think clean energy progress solely on government subsidies, especially. In reality, I most should be given to Chinese startups, companies, SMEs. I think instead to who had made great advancement, cost control, and large productions. There's a lot of and very interesting dynamics inside the countries. So that contributed significantly in global clean energy and the cost reductions. I think China is mostly mindset here is driven, result driven. We talk less about the missions, the logic, reason behind. So that creates sometimes misconceptions.
Gee, looking ahead next 5 to 10 years, what are your most optimistic predictions for China's role in the global clean energy transition? What kind of transformation do you envision for its energy landscape and economy?
Mm. I just hope China to be the global leader, and also I hope and share its experiences more openly and more proactively. As in terms of figure, we see that China still continue to reshape the energy landscape. The renewable projects it supply 50% of the electricity in 10 years, 2035, and they by 2050. I see the country is making strides in clean energy adoptions. And investment wise, last year we invested around like 1 trillion in clean, nearly matching the global fossil fuel investment. So I think that's big commitment to the economy towards more sustainable.
Absolutely. What is the single most important action, policy, technological breakthrough, or societal shift that China needs to take to ensure it reaches its 2060 carbon neutrality goal?
Well, I think in the short term, in the next 5 to 10 years, the greatest challenge is geopolitics because I think the Chinese, they are quite determined. When they set a goal, normally it follows through. So I'm actually very confident. Carbon neutrality target was grounded in like solid science and in like decision tensions in geopolitics, also trade risks. I think that adds pressure for Chinese governments, like more demands and technological breakthroughs. It has more the capacity of governance, strategic acumen. So successful for 2060, I think we are determined whether China can secure the leading position in development in the middle century.
As a clean titan yourself, what message would you like to share with our audience, the entrepreneurs, scientists, and investors who are working to drive the green energy revolution? What can they do to contribute to a sustainable future, perhaps drawing inspiration from China's journey?
Thanks for the question. For me, energy transition, it's a really beautiful dynamic interplay between top-down in directives and bottom-up initiatives. Over the last year since I joined New Energy Nexus, myself have witnessed the immense passion and the rapid development in the field. I think the world is observing China's commitment in clean energy, and I do have the confidence in the directions. But on the other hand, to admit China needs to enhance its narrative on this effort and like reduce misconceptions. So I to this reflection. That's why I took the ink myself to and for like the rest of the world, at least like a New Energy Nexus position, we believe in collective actions. We believe in networks because we know climate issues are pressing and you cannot work that out alone. So for rather than get tangled in ideological debates, I hope more people will concentrate on tangible actions and measurable outcomes. And I also hope all the global North countries and also developed markets can inspire by showing good examples, inspire global South countries to follow suit. And yeah, so I think the more advanced I would say are, the more responsibility you should carry on.
Any startup you're working on with the clean energy you're particularly excited about?
Probably I gonna skip this, not show much like in terms of like the technology. Currently, a lot biomass. I myself, I think it has a lot of potential, but it's not under the spotlight yet. And then we have quite a few companies working on that. They're competing with American peers and European peers as well, but with a good outcome already.
Jia, this has been incredibly insightful and thought provoking conversation. Your expertise and perspective provide such valuable clarity on a critical topic. Thank you so much for sharing your time and knowledge with the Clean Titans community. It's truly been an honor.
Thank you.
For
Thank you for
our,
the invitation.
you're welcome. Thank you for tuning in to Clean Titans. If you found this interview as enlightening as we did, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and don't forget to subscribe to Clean Titans for more exclusive interviews with the minds shaping our sustainable future. See you next time.